Faking your death to live a different life under a new identity isn't just for mystery films and novels. Many people worldwide believe famous people survived long after they allegedly died. For centuries, there have been legends told and rumors whispered that the 47-year-old ruler of Russia, Tsar Alexander I, faked his death in a remote village in southern Russia. Is that true? Who was Fyodor Kuzmich? What do a dead Tsar and a Siberian monk have to do with each other? In this video, we will discuss all these secrets. But let's find out who Tsar Alexander I was. Tsar Alexander I, 23 December 1777, 1 December 1825, nicknamed the Blessed, was the Tsar of Russia from 1801 until he died in 1825. He ruled Russia during the chaotic period of the Napoleonic Wars. Alexander died of typhus in December 1825 while on a trip to southern Russia. He left no legitimate children, as his two daughters died in childhood. Neither of his brothers wanted to become Tsar. After a period of great confusion, he was succeeded by his younger brother, Nicholas I. Fyodor Kuzmich is an elder of an Eastern Orthodox monastery who serves as a venerated teacher and advisor. Starets are considered an inspiration in the minds of believers and an example of saintly virtue, steadfast faith, and spiritual peace. Many believe Fyodor was Alexander I, living as a monk under a new name. What adds to the legend is the lack of information about Fyodor's early life. The first time Fyodor appeared in the public eye was in 1836 in Perm after a local blacksmith found Fyodor's appearance strange and alerted the authorities. Fyodor was described as tall, about 60 years old with lashes on his back, and did not have any documentation on him when he was arrested. When interrogated by authorities, Fyodor said he was Eastern Orthodox, illiterate, and had zero memories about his infancy or much of his early life before then. Due to Fyodor's lack of documents, a court sent him to the Siberian city of Tomsk. He lived a life of labor, slept only on a bare board, and only owned and wore simple clothing. In contrast to how an emperor would live, Saint Fyodor lived a simple life. His home was a small cell with narrow windows. The old man slept on a wooden bed. His clothes were simple. In summer, he wore a long white shirt made of village linen. He had only 2 shirts, belted with a thin strap or rope, and he also wore wide trousers made of linen. In winter, he put on a long dark blue robe over the shirt, or if he went out in the cold, he put on an old faded Siberian fur coat. His lunch usually consisted of black bread or dried crust soaked in plain water. For some reason, his appearance and unique mannerisms were seen as strange in Tomsk, and people assumed he had previously lived a very different life from his life in Tomsk. When villagers would ask Fyodor about his life before becoming a church elder and why he would live this simplistic life free of luxuries of comfort, all he would say was,
"Why do you usually think that my situation is worse now than it was once before? At present I am free, independent, and most importantly, easygoing. Before, my peace and happiness depended on many conditions. It was necessary to take care of my loved ones enjoying the same happiness as I did, so that my friends would not deceive me. Now there is nothing of this except what will always remain with me, except the words of my God, except for the love of the Savior and neighbor. Now I have no grief and disappointment, because I do not depend on anything earthly, nor on anything that is not in my power. You do not understand what happiness is in this freedom of the Spirit, in this unearthly joy. If you would restore me to the former position, and make me again the guardian of earthly wealth, perishable, and now altogether unnecessary to me, then I would be an unhappy man. The more our body is pampered and groomed, the weaker our spirit becomes. Every luxury relaxes our body and weakens our soul."
The vague answer was all Fyodor would say about his past. But there are other strange events. For an unknown reason, some members of the imperial family visited him. Elder Fyodor died on January 20, 1864. According to the birth certificate, he was 80 years old. He was buried in the enclosure of the Bogorodets Alexievsky Monastery. On the second day after the elder's death, a pencil portrait was made of him on his deathbed, as during his lifetime, he refused to have his portrait painted. Tomsk photographer Efimov took photographs of him, which were popular among the townspeople. After the elder's death, the merchant Kromov sorted through the things he left behind. Among them, he allegedly discovered a document on the marriage of Tsar Alexander I, a small carved ivory crucifix, chain of the Order of St. Andrew I called, drawn monogram in the form of the letter A, Psalter with the inscription, "This Psalter belongs to the Saransk Peter and Paul Monastery to the Cossack monk Alexei Zolotov." Short encrypted notes were also found, which were called the Secret of Fyodor. The veneration of Elder Fyodor began soon after his death. The place of his burial was especially revered. On the site of the elder's cell on the farmstead of the merchant Kromov, the Fyodorovsky monastery was founded, for which the merchant allocated 60 desiatines of land. The Tomsk architect Vikenty Ozheshko created a project for a chapel over the elder's grave. In 1904, with money donated by numerous admirers of the elder, the construction of the chapel was completed, and on August 16 it was solemnly consecrated. During its construction, the remains of Elder Fyodor were discovered, which were declared incorruptible. In 1936, the chapel was destroyed and a cesspool was built in its place. In 1984, Elder Fyodor was canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church as Saint Fyodor of Tomsk as part of the Council of Siberian Saints. His relics were found on July 5, 1995, in a cesspool on the site of a destroyed chapel. In 1997, the chapel over the elder's grave was restored. The memory of the righteous Fyodor of Tomsk is celebrated according to the Julian calendar, June 10 as a church-wide celebration as part of the Council of Siberian Saints, and January 20 and June 22 as local celebrations in the Tomsk diocese. Prayers and akathists have been composed for the holy righteous Fyodor of Tomsk. Pilgrims from different places continued to come to him. People retold stories about the elder's miraculous help, how he healed a sick priest, predicted a happy marriage for a couple, and even exposed an escaped convict murderer. According to many admirers, miracles continued. Those who came to bow to the righteous Fyodor were cured of illnesses, warring people were reconciled, and the desperate found faith to live on. We have some testimonies from contemporaries and some indirect evidence about this mystery. A coal heaver from the Tsar's house who was exiled in Siberia recognized Tsar Alexander I, disguised as the hermit Fyodor, and he was also recognized by a former soldier, who remembered the Tsar from the time of his service at the palace in St. Petersburg. One former state employee also recognized him and even fainted when she heard a familiar voice. Moreover, graphology experts have confirmed that the handwriting of Elder Fyodor of Tomsk and that of Tsar Alexander I is identical. Svetlana Semenova, president of the Russian Graphological Society, who analyzed manuscripts written by the Tsar and the elder Fyodor, said that they contain the handwriting of the same man. Alexander I's tomb has been opened 4 times in the past, and the most recent opening was in 1921. Soviet authorities allegedly had the tomb open to look for and remove any valuable metals on the body or in the tomb. Every time the tomb was opened, it was reported to be empty or showed signs of tampering. An announcement was made in 2017 that there would be a DNA genetic analysis that would officially determine if Fyodor was indeed Alexander I. Nothing has been reported in any Russian scientific or forensics journal about the test, and there has been no news of the results. We have no way of knowing if the test was done at all. There is a motive for such a voluntary exile from the court as well. It is suspected Alexander I had good reason to fake his death. Alexander I's father, Paul I, was assassinated, and Alexander I did nothing to stop the murder from occurring. He might have chosen to fake his death because he was overcome by guilt about his father's death. Alexander I is believed to have faked his death to abdicate the throne and spend the rest of his days seeking forgiveness from God because he allowed his father to be assassinated. This theory is strange and is why only some believe that Alexander I and Fyodor were the same person. No Russian leader had willingly stepped down from their role until Tsar Nicholas II was forced to do so by the Petrograd insurgents in 1917. This is not to say that a Russian leader could not abdicate the throne if they wanted. It just was something that had never happened. Could Alexander I have abdicated the throne and faked his death only to live as a monk in Siberia? Yes. However, it would be an extraordinary way to retire. Whatever the results, it seems unlikely that any definitive answer to the mystery will be forthcoming.